Thanks for joining me for this edition of the Author's Corner, brought to you by KNEO 91.7 FM, The Word. I'm Roberta Foster. Today I welcome Matt Markins to Author's Corner, and he has written the book, Daddy, How Much Do You Love Me? It's published by New Growth Press, and pictures are by Daniela Sosa. He'll tell you more about how to find the book at the end of the program. Welcome to Author's Corner, Matt.
It's good to be with you, Roberta.
So in your bio, it states that you have written other books, co-authored of 6 books, most notably Forming Faith, Discipling the Next Generation in a Post-Christian Culture. And that you're also the co-founder of Child Discipleship Forum and D6 Conference. So you're involved a lot with providing materials for parents and children to be raised up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, are you not?
Yeah, so for 20 years I've been studying and researching child faith formation, and much more formally the last 14 years, commissioned 14 research projects on asking the question, what forms biblical lasting faith in kids? So I'm that guy on an airplane when they say, hey, tell me what you do for a living. My thought is always, how do I talk about this very narrow niche, on planet Earth? So that's always a lot of fun. Yeah, but my background is in helping the church and helping parents understand, according to the Bible and research, as well as best practices of church history, what can we do to help shape and form the faith of our kids?
Great. Well, we certainly need a lot of that. Our children are needing a lot of attention from their parents. So this book is addressed to daddies. Daddy, yeah. How much do you love me? Why is it important that fathers actively engage with their children? Because this is, I assume, a book that you encourage dads to read to their children.
Certainly. Well, let's start just at adults in general, and then I'll drill down into fathers. There's abundant research that shows that when a child has consistent access to a loving, caring, healthy, stable adult in their life, that child is more likely to what you would call become a successful, thriving adult on all the ways that you would probably define that. But then when you start thinking specifically from the Christian faith, if that person is a Christ follower who's helping, to disciple to the best of their ability and to point their kid to Christ, and then you get a little more narrow and you start talking about mom and dad. Of course, moms and dads both have very, very important roles. But there's, ample research that also just shows that a loving, caring father who's both clear in terms of, discipline and boundaries and rules and all those sorts of things, but also kind and compassionate and gentle and loving, that kind of father, for kids who have that just creates so much stability in life, and it creates a sense of security and safety. So dads just play a really, really important role. And I wanted to write a book that kids and dads could love together. But certainly where a dad could be challenged, maybe consciously or subconsciously, without even thinking about it, just by reading the story together.
Yes, you have the dad and the child doing all kinds of wonderful activities together, and like you said, that may challenge some dads to think about getting out of the house more and doing things with their children. So something very specific inspired you to write this book. Why don't you share that with our listeners?
Well, back in the day when I used to listen to James Dobson on the radio, this is like late 90s, I was on break at work, and I listened to a wonderful broadcast of him interviewing the biblical Christian apologist named Josh McDowell. Josh's son has now kind of taken the baton. His son's name is Sean McDowell. They both have a great, long-standing ministry. But the story is about the two of them. Josh was telling a story about taking his, at that time, small son, Sean, to a college football game. And he said, Sean, look at the stadium. Look around. How many people do you think are here? And, little Sean McDowell was like, man, I don't know. There's too many to count. And Josh said to his son, he said, Josh, I love you more than all of these people combined. And when I heard that in the 90s, I was very captivated about that. And then fast forward to around 2010, I had small boys at the time. I was on a flight from Nashville, where I live, to San Diego. And somewhere on that flight, I got to thinking about that story and just had a creative burst. And I wrote the original draft of this book that's gone through many revisions down through the years until we just published it this past year. So, but the idea is, hey, dads, let's look for little moments. Maybe they're big moments, maybe they're epic, or maybe they're just small, mundane moments. But I think a key word is cognizant. If dads can be cognizant that these moments matter, we can really impress our love upon our kids and continue to point them to God.
Amen. Well, today I am talking with Matt Markins regarding the book he wrote, Daddy, How Much Do You Love Me?, which is published by New Growth Press. You're listening to Author's Corner, and I'm Roberta Foster. What are some of the intentional ways that dads can show their love for their children aside from just being with them?
Well, kids are multisensory, right? We've got this sense of sight and smell and taste and touch and probably others that I'm not remembering. But, the human experience is cognitive, it's spiritual, it's emotional. So as a dad, ask yourself, what is a variety? What would be a tasty way to say I love you? Well, let's go out for ice cream. Or what would really get those emotions going? What if I stopped at the store and bought them a little card that just simply says I love you, and I put it on their pillow when I leave for work? Or what if we just go for a walk and I tell them on this walk, I tell both of my kids or one of my kids, I tell them, hey, can I tell you about a time when I really messed up? And kids think of their parents sometimes as perfect, and I tell a story about the time that I hit the baseball toward the house and it went through the window and I had to confess, and and my kids are like, Dad, you did not do that. Yes, I did do that. But here's what it taught me. It taught me how to tell the truth. It taught me, I needed to take, I got grounded, and I needed to take that discipline because I earned that by hitting the ball the wrong way. So when we talk about these things, what are we doing? We're creating little moments where we're sharing our heart with their heart, and we just find ways to tell our kids, I love them. In that same story, we could end that by saying, guess what? In life, we're going to sin and we're going to mess up a lot, but guess what? Jesus is our Redeemer and forgives us because he loves you, and I'm your dad, and I love you too. There's nothing you will ever do that will cause me to not love you, and God's the same way. So whether it's ice cream, going on a walk, whether it's an epic vacation, dads, be looking for little moments and multi-sensory ways to tell your kids that you love them and point them to God's love.
And just saying the words out loud, I reflect on my childhood, and my dad was Norwegian in his ancestry, and so I hear that they're very stoic, and if that's the case, then that my dad lived up to the reputation. I don't recall him ever telling me that he loved me, and as there's songs written about, well, he didn't say it, but he showed it, and this kind of stuff. But I think there's still a real necessity for children to actually hear the words, not just see the actions. Would you agree?
That's absolutely correct. First of all, thank you for sharing that. I'm sorry to hear that. And also, by the way, I've been to Norway 8 times, so we've got a lot to talk about. But, I think kids need to hear the words. Kids need to hear the words, I love you. I'm looking you in the eye. I'm looking you in the eye, and I'm grabbing your hand, or I'm putting my arm on your shoulder, or giving you a hug, and dads telling their kids in those types of close environments, I love you. I'm so proud of you. I will always love you. There's nothing you can do that's going to cause me to not love you. Even if you make a big mistake or go down a wrong path, I'm going to stand beside you. Just like that father and the prodigal son ran toward his son, I'm going to run towards you. Because why? First of all, I love you because you're mine, but also I want to continue to point you toward the grace of the gospel and the salvation of Jesus.
Being present, patient, and pursuing your children. You tell how one of these was more challenging to you than the others when you were raising your boys. So how did you work to improve in that area? Yeah,
if my wife were on this call, she would honestly say my husband's very patient. I am a patient person, and I think I was also pretty pursuing. I tried to find ways to pursue my kids, but the hardest one for me, having a job that travels, and then even when you are home, you've got the emails coming in the phone, and you've got coworkers calling you after hours. And so being present for me, if I'm being very vulnerable and very honest, was the most challenging of those three. Again, they're pursuing, present, and patient. Those are the three P's of what we see the father and the prodigal son doing. But for me, the hardest one was just making sure I was being fully present. And there were times I was great at it. There were times I put the phone away and did great. But with the consistent demands of whatever your line of work is, Dad, you might find, or maybe sometimes it's escapism. I'm not working. I'm just home and I'm trying to just go into neutral. That's a way where dads cannot be present, even though you might be in the room. So we have to battle that. We have to fight to be present emotionally, verbally, spiritually, and even sometimes physically. So being present is something we really have to work at as dads.
Well, and you mentioned being present spiritually. You have to be intentional in working towards developing a lasting faith with your kids. So you write about 3 primary factors that shape a lasting faith in kids. Why don't you share those with us?
Sure. We've been studying this since 2013, commissioned 14 research projects, and we found that there are 3 primary factors that when a child has all 3, so moms and dads or pastors, write these down, or if you pay attention, these 3 factors, we call them belong, believe, become, and I'll explain them. But even if you don't like our 3B language, some people think, oh, it's too perfect. Well, okay, let's talk about what those really mean. You could also call those relationships, Scripture engagement, and experiences. So belong is highly relational. Believe is deeply scriptural. Become is truly experiential. So how do we arrive at this? First thing we did is we just read the Gospels and asked ourselves, what do we see Jesus doing when he's discipling others? And you start to notice those 3 behaviors. He's highly relational. He's talking to the woman at the well. He's talking to someone while he's walking along the road. He's going to a feast or a meal, so on and so forth. But he was also deeply scriptural. He was consistently pointing back to the Old Testament scrolls, or teaching in the synagogue, or teaching around the campfire. So he's deeply scriptural, consistently. And then thirdly, experiential. Jesus sent people out. Jesus did stuff with people. And there's, of course, the spiritual practices that come from the Sermon on the Mount, or from the Bible, or from church history. And so what's happening is when a child has all 3 of those, loving, caring adults who are highly relational, putting them in environments that are deeply scriptural and on a consistent basis, and then helping them experience the culture around them. Like for example, if you're getting bullied at school, what is a parent or a pastor to do? You got to help them know how to experience and navigate that very difficult situation. And so when all 3 of those factors a child has over the course of their childhood, you're giving them the best likelihood of remaining in the faith if you're doing all of those things on a consistent basis.
So your book ends after a wonderful story and reiteration again and again and again how much Daddy loves his son. You actually have a letter to dads at the end of the book. And why did you include that, and what does it say in a brief format?
Well, I was really struck. Obviously, the parable of the prodigal son in the Gospels is a famous story. Even people outside of the church, or perhaps some of them, you might be somewhat familiar with this story. But Jesus is just before he goes into telling 3 parables in a row. He tells about parable of a lost coin and a lost sheep. Basically, he's trying to talk about things or people who are lost who have now been found, because he was getting criticized by being around people who were lost, by being around people who were the social outcasts, or the sinners, so to speak. And Jesus was saying, no. Let me tell you what we do with lost things. Let me tell you what we do with lost people. And when he's telling this story about a father and his 2 sons, what we often miss is that both sons were lost. Like, one son was immoral, he was rebellious, and he went off and he wasted his inheritance. And then the good son, the self-righteous son, he was lost too, because what did both of the sons have in common? Both sons wanted the father's stuff, but they did not want the father. And so Jesus is telling it's a story to all of us. You might be like the self-righteous good son, or you might be like the immoral bad son. But what did the father do? He approached both of them. He ran out to hug the immoral son when he returned, and he left the party and went out to meet with and talk to the older son, and he said, everything that is mine is yours. So Jesus is telling, what do we do with lost things? And this father gives us a beautiful picture. He's patient, he's pursuing, and he's present. That's a challenge to all dads.
Mm-hmm. Well, today I've been talking with Matt Markins about his book, Daddy, How Much Do You Love Me? It's a hardback book, beautiful pictures, as mentioned before, by Daniela Sosa. Just a very simple but reinforced message of how to just keep telling your child how much Daddy loves them, but more importantly, or maybe equally important, is that God loves them. So, Matt, how can people find out more about what you're doing, other books that you've written, and how to get this book?
To get the book, go to anywhere you would normally buy books, Goodreads, Amazon, all those normal places, Christian Book Distributor, all those places online. And if you want to check out a couple of our key organizational websites, go to childdiscipleship.com. childdiscipleship.com. And if you're a parent or pastor, almost all those resources are free. We're just trying to equip parents and church leaders on how to biblically disciple your kids. And if you want to check out our organization, it's called Awana, Child Discipleship. So go to awana.org, awana.org.
Fantastic. So one more time, the book is Daddy, How Much Do You Love Me? And I've been talking with Matt Markins, and we thank New Growth Press for giving us a copy of the book to talk about. And Matt, thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, it's such a delight. Thank you.
And to our listeners, if you missed any part of today's interview, or perhaps you'd like to share it with a daddy that you know that this could encourage, you can now find it on your favorite podcast platform or through our website, kneo.org. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is Roberta Foster on the Author's Corner. Join me again next time.